Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why it is so tough to connect with people sometimes, or why social situations can feel so stressful? Well, this new study might have some fascinating clues. This study dives into something super important for all of us social animals, how our brains process social cues, specifically when we think something is directed at us. Think about whether someone's looking at you or if that compliment was really for you. The researchers found that a specific way our brains gather information when looking at faces is linked to how well we function socially and even to certain mental health challenges. So why is this so important? Well, the introduction tells us that social problems are a big deal across many mental health conditions. Whether someone is dealing with psychosis, autism, or severe social anxiety, struggling in social situations is a common thread. It really impacts their quality of life. And a really fundamental part of navigating the social world is understanding where other people are looking. Is their gaze directed at you? This isn't just a minor thing. It is like the building block for more complex social stuff, like figuring out what someone's thinking or what they intend. When this gaze perception gets messed up, it is linked to worse outcomes. And guess what? These gaze perception problems aren't just in one or two conditions. They pop up in social anxiety, where people might think everyone's staring at them. They show up in psychosis too, where people might also misinterpret gaze. And in autism, people can sometimes be slower or less accurate at judging where someone is looking. This suggests that problems with how we process gaze could be a shared reason why people struggle socially across different diagnoses. That is why studying a broad group of people, not just those with one specific diagnosis, is so smart. It helps us find the common ground. Now, understanding exactly why gaze perception gets disrupted is tricky. Traditional tests often just look at how accurate someone is or how long they take to respond, but those can be misleading. Luckily, scientists have got these cool tools called computational models. Think of them like really smart computer programs that can break down complex mental processes into tiny steps. In this study, they use something called drift diffusion models, or DDMs for short. Imagine your brain is trying to decide if someone's looking at you. It starts with an initial guess, and then it collects little bits of evidence. Some bits say yes, they're looking at you, and some say no, they're not. The DDM model how this evidence piles up over time until your brain makes a decision. A really key part of this DDM is something called drift sensitivity. This basically measures how well your brain can pick up on those important social cues, like the direction of someone's eyes, especially when the signal isn't super clear. The stronger the signal, the more easily your brain should be able to process it if your drift sensitivity is good. They looked at how sensitive people were to these gaze signals. So, the big question for this study was, is this evidence accumulation sensitivity, how well your brain picks up on gaze cues, only a problem for people with psychosis? Or could it be a wider issue affecting social function and other mental health conditions too? They tested this in a group of young adults aged 14 to 30 who had varying levels of social problems. Psychosis proneness, social anxiety, and autistic traits. This age range is crucial because it's a time when many mental health conditions start to develop. How did they do it? They had 111 participants play a computer game. In this game, they looked at faces and had to decide if the person was looking at them or not. To make it more like real life, they messed with two things. First, they made the gaze direction a bit ambiguous, sometimes looking directly, sometimes just off to the side. Second, they added this noise to the images, making the faces blurry or fuzzy, kind of like trying to figure out someone's expression across a crowded room. This helped them see how well people could gather evidence even when the social cues weren't crystal clear. While the participants played this game, their eye movements were tracked. And they used the data, both their choices and how fast they responded, to build those drift diffusion models for each person. They also gave participants other tests to measure their social cognition, like the reading the mind in the eyes test, where you have to guess emotions from just eyes. And they looked at their general social functioning using different questionnaires filled out by the participants themselves, their friends or family, and even researchers. They measured different symptom dimensions too. Psychosis proneness, social anxiety symptoms, and autistic traits. So, the big reveal, what did they find? First, they confirmed their first hypothesis. They found that higher evidence accumulation sensitivity, meaning people were better at picking up on those gaze cues, was strongly linked to better social cognition. This makes a lot of sense. If you are good at gathering the right social information, you'll likely be better at understanding complex social situations. They also found that this evidence accumulation sensitivity was modestly linked to better social functioning in real life. So, people who were better at picking up on gaze cues tended to do a bit better in their social interactions and relationships. Even though the link wasn't as strong as with social cognition, it was still there. suggesting this basic perceptual skill has real-world importance. Now, for the psychopathology part, they found that when people had lower evidence accumulation sensitivity to gaze cues, they had higher levels of psychosis proneness. This means if your brain struggles to gather information about gaze, you might be more likely to have experiences that are common in psychosis, like feeling like things are directed at you when they're not. And interestingly, the same pattern, lower evidence accumulation sensitivity linked to more symptoms, was found for social anxiety. This is quite significant. It suggests that the difficulty in gathering social evidence isn't just about psychosis. It can also be a factor in the social fears experienced by people with social anxiety. However, in a surprising twist, evidence accumulation sensitivity during gaze perception wasn't linked to autistic traits in this study. The researchers think this might be because the specific task they used, which focused on a clear visual feature like eyes, might actually play to the strengths of people with autistic traits who often do well with processing focused. Hi. Contrast information. They suggest future studies should look at more complex social tasks for autism. It's also important to note that these findings held up even when they accounted for participants' general intelligence. This means the results aren't just about having a lower IQ. It's something more specific about how the brain processes social information. Another really interesting point is that when they only looked at simpler measures like just accuracy or just response time, they didn't find these strong links. It was only when they used the more complex drift diffusion model, which considers both speed and accuracy together, that these significant associations emerged. This highlights the power of these computational models to reveal deeper insights. So, what is the big takeaway? This research strongly suggests that how efficiently our brains collect and use information from social cues, especially gaze, is really important. It's a key piece that helps explain why people struggle in social situations and why certain mental health conditions are linked to social difficulties. It seems like trouble with this fundamental process of gathering social evidence could be a common vulnerability, particularly for those conditions marked by social fears and suspicions, like psychosis and social anxiety. The fact that this evidence accumulation sensitivity is linked to social cognition and real-world social functioning is powerful. It means that understanding how well people process these basic social signals can help us understand their broader social abilities. And for the symptom dimensions, the link with psychosis proneness and social anxiety is particularly compelling. It offers a potential cognitive mechanism explaining why these conditions share social challenges. Think about it. If you are constantly struggling to know if someone's looking at you or if you fear negative attention, it makes sense that social situations would become much more stressful and difficult. While the lack of a link with autistic traits in this specific study might be confusing, it actually opens up an interesting avenue for future research. It suggests that the way autistic individuals process social information might differ, perhaps relying more on different types of cues or different cognitive strategies. One of the strongest points of this study is its methodological innovation. By using these drift diffusion models, they could look beyond simple accuracy and see the underlying processes. This is crucial because, as they point out, sometimes people might get the right answer, accuracy, by taking a really long time, slow reaction time, hiding an underlying difficulty in quickly processing information. These models help uncover that hidden story. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers themselves acknowledged some limitations. They looked at a basic social cue gaze, but social interaction involves much more. Also, this was a cross-sectional study, meaning they looked at these links at one point in time. They can't say for sure if the evidence accumulation issue causes social problems, or if social problems lead to these processing differences. Future research, maybe tracking people over time, could shed light on that. They also suggested that future studies should use similar measures for all the symptom groups to avoid potential biases from using different types of questionnaires. But even with these limitations, the core message is really exciting. This research provides strong evidence that how we gather social information, especially gaze cues, is a fundamental building block for social functioning. It is not just about what you see, but how your brain makes sense of it efficiently. This opens doors for better understanding and potentially developing new ways to help people who struggle with social connections, especially those facing challenges like psychosis and social anxiety. It really highlights the need to consider both speed and accuracy when we study social cognition. What do I think about this research? I think it is a fantastic example of how computational modeling can unlock deeper understandings of complex human behavior. By using these sophisticated models, the researchers were able to move beyond surface level observations to explore the underlying cognitive mechanisms at play. The finding that a core perceptual process like evidence accumulation is linked across social cognition, social functioning, and even different psychopathology dimensions is a significant step towards a more integrated dimensional understanding of mental health. It brings us closer to identifying common vulnerabilities that might underlie diverse conditions. The distinction they made regarding the lack of association with autistic traits in this specific task is also very thought-provoking. It challenges us to think about how different cognitive profiles interact with specific task demands and reminds us that a one-size-fits-all approach to cognitive assessment doesn't work for complex conditions like autism. Moving forward, I'm really curious to see how this work will influence interventions. If these difficulties in evidence accumulation are indeed a core mechanism, could we design interventions to strengthen this specific process? Imagine training programs that help people more effectively and efficiently process social cues, potentially leading to better social functioning and reduced distress in social situations. And I do hope to see more longitudinal studies to clarify the directionality of these effects. That's all for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give us a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of the mind. Thanks for watching.